But in just a few hours, this day will be called the dawn of the space age. A human being is about to go up into near-Earth orbit. He is Soviet citizen Yuri Gagarin. Conquerors of the universe. Script Igor Bulgarin and Nikolai Makarov. Consultants Air Marshal Yefimov, Colonel General Grigoriev, Colonel General Kamanin, and candidate of Technical Sciences Yeremenko. Direction Nikolai Makarov. Camera Boris Smirnov. The years and centuries will pass, but humanity will never forget this exploit of the Soviet Union.
Идеи Константина Эдуардовича Циолковского о покорении космического пространства.
Academician Valentin Glushko, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky's idea on conquering cosmic space and its unlimited expanses and wealth conquered us, his disciples, as well. They became the main goal in our lives. Rocket and space activities became truly extensive after the Great October Socialist Revolution. In the country's outlying areas, battles were still being waged against the remnants of counter-revolutionary bands. But in Moscow, in the spring of 1921, a government scientific research and experimental designing organization was established to design a rocket propelled by smokeless powder. In 1925, this organization moved to Leningrad, where it was called the Dynamic Gas Laboratory. This laboratory produced the first models of rockets propelled by smokeless powder, later to win acclaim as the famous Katyusha during the Second World War. Here also we designed the first Soviet-made liquid fuel rocket engine, several other models, and finally a series of powerful engines installed on all carrier rockets launched into space. In the autumn of 1931, groups of rocket enthusiasts began appearing in many cities. Designing and launching of all Soviet rockets using liquid fuel was conducted by Sergei Korolev. The 1930s were years of romantic adventures, the first five-year plans, the first collective farms, a new world, and a new type of man were being born. Not all was yet in order down on Earth, but they were already looking up into the sky, into outer space. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky's 75th birthday was being celebrated nationwide. What he said about flying among the stars was heard with the greatest admiration. They were ready to fly to the stars immediately. We shall begin our film with the story of a few events that took place in 1934, whose repercussions were felt in 1961. While blazing a path through the Arctic Ocean, the icebreaker Cheluskin sank on February 14, 1934, and 104 survivors were left on the ice. Foreign newspapers wrote pessimistically about the chances of saving them. The land of Soviets, they wrote, has a weak aviation, and Russian pilots have no experience in flying in the north. But the Soviet people accomplished the impossible. On April 13th, the last of the survivors was removed by plane to the mainland. The world saw that in just a few years, the land of Soviets had grown mighty wings. Seven pilots were awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. One of these brave seven, Nikolai Kamanin, many years later became teacher and friend of the world's first cosmonaut, Yuri Gagarin. The village of Klushino in the Smolensk region. On March 9, 1934, an insignificant event took place there. The third child was born to collective farmers Alexei and Anna Gagarin. They called the boy Yuri. Leningrad, 1934. The first national conference on studying the stratosphere was held here in the Academy of Sciences from March 31st to April 6th. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky was elected honorary chairman of the conference presidium. The conference was particularly attentive to the problems of rocket technology. A report on rocket flying machines and the problems of man's flight into the stratosphere on a rocket was delivered by Sergei Korolev. Besides problems of theory, Korolev was also deep in practical research. The rocket plane he designed was tested on the eve of the war. Designs were then being completed of a plane with a rocket engine by constructors Berezhnyak and Isaev. But the work was broken off by the war. In May of 1942, deep in the Urals near the city of Sverdlovsk, Captain Bakhchivadze went up in the first Soviet-made jet plane. This was while Hitler's troops were driving for Stalingrad. The war. Yuri Gagarin was just over 7 years old. This is the city of Gzhatsk, right after it was liberated. Yuri Gagarin could have been among these children. And this is how the legendary Katyusha terrified the enemy. Katyushas are also rockets, and they became something of a symbol of our victory. The war was over. The Soviet people started rebuilding their towns and cities, plants and factories, and strengthening their defense potential. party and government instructed scientists to create a powerful rocket technology.
Сложность ракетно-космического комплекса, состоящего из большого количества...
The complexity of the whole rocket cosmic package, consisting of many systems and subsystems, required a large number of designing bureaus and institutes to be organized.
Для координации их работы
To coordinate their work, a council of chief designers was established. It included those who drew up the systems and subsystems.
главный конструктор
For example, the chief designer of carrier rocket control system, Nikolai Pilyugin, is an academician today.
главный конструктор стартовых
The chief designer of launching systems, Vladimir Barmin, is also an academician. The organization I headed designed engines for the carrier rockets.
Ну, а возглавлял Совет главный
The council was headed by Sergei Korolev. While the rockets were being designed, a location had to be found for a testing ground and launching pad. There was no experience in this. Everything had to be started from scratch, far from any housing, in difficult climatic conditions. And the people worked just like they fought in the war, without let-up, in hot and freezing weather alike. A new and complex industry was coming into being, the rocket industry. It was headed by a talented organizer, then the Minister of Armaments, Dmitry Ustinov. The first Soviet-made ballistic rockets went up in November 1948. In 1956, a long-range ballistic missile was launched. A year later, the world learned that the USSR had designed a multi-stage intercontinental ballistic missile. Here is what Sergei Korolev had written in his diary then. I think man's most cherished dream is close to fulfillment. In all epochs, man would gaze into the deep blue of the skies and would dream. Man dreamed of flying to the stars, of flying into space. The office of Leonid Brezhnev, then a secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, resembled a headquarters where decisions were taken on the most intricate problems of rocket engineering. Leonid Brezhnev could often be seen on the testing grounds and at the plants where rockets were being built. He discussed the minutest problems, quickly understood the most difficult questions, could clearly suggest what to do and how to do it. In the autumn of 1957, assembly was nearing completion of the first artificial satellite of the Earth, or Sputnik in Russian. It was launched October 4th. The Soviet people had opened a new era, the era of space conquest. Meanwhile, what changes had taken place in the life of Yuri Gagarin? He worked as a foundryman, then enrolled at the Saratov Industrial School, and continued attending flying school. Later, he was sent to the military flying school in Orenburg. There he heard the news that the first artificial Sputnik was launched. After graduating flying school, Lieutenant Yuri Gagarin served in the north. He served in a far-off Air Force garrison. This is where he lived. This is where his fighter plane took off. One of Yuri Gagarin's comrades was Major Vladimir Shtadilov, who served in the same air wing with him. Yuri would tell him of his dreams. He dreamed that a pilot would become the first man in space, and that dream came true. It was here in the office of the commanding officer that in 1960 Senior Lieutenant Yuri Gagarin was told he was being sent off to join the first group of cosmonauts. But let's return to 1957, to the very time when the first Sputnik was being launched. Corresponding member of the USSR Academy of Sciences, Konstantin Bushuyev. When we, waiting for the signals from the first artificial Earth satellite, were all crowded around the receiver and finally heard those signals, we were all overwhelmed with an unusual enthusiasm. Like children, we were overjoyed. We embraced and kissed each other. Later, much more complex flying machines were constructed, cosmic ships, orbital stations. But the Sputnik was the first. The work that went into creating it will go down in history as a great scientific and technological achievement in cosmic science. Academician Oleg Gazenko. The second Sputnik was being readied simultaneously with the first. The second Sputnik carried a passenger, the dog Laika. From this moment on, the work became highly important. It was necessary to receive information on the possibility of live organisms surviving during prolonged space flights. Research was started on the effects of cosmic flights on live biological objects. Simultaneously, scientists had to deal with numerous technical puzzles, also connected with man's flight into space. Konstantin Feoktistov, Doctor of Technical Sciences. This project did not just appear suddenly. Not long ago, I was looking through Korolyov's papers and came upon his notes on plans for the coming decade. Man's flight was scheduled for 1964-65. But that was the end of 1957 and the beginning of 1958, and it seemed this could be achieved earlier. We didn't know how to do this, but we're certain it could be done. We were looking for a solution of how to build a Sputnik in which man could fly into space and return to Earth. We knew how to launch it. We had the rocket. The problem was how to get it back. We had to find a simple solution to bring it down. There were ideas of whether we should adopt a diagram of a ballistic landing. This idea dated to approximately the winter of 1958. But here we had to find the shape of the apparatus for a ballistic landing. We examined the most fantastic ideas. The umbrella diagram, a huge umbrella was to slow down the descent in the atmosphere. A diagram of a revolving screw whose lifting force would create a retro force. All sorts of cones, a semi-sphere, and finally, in April, we got the idea of using the sphere as a form of a descending apparatus. This was simple and realistic, and therefore quickly closed the gap to the day when man would fly into space. We really got down to working on the project after the council met. This was the beginning of 1959. This is where Korolev displayed his ability to follow a tense schedule, to do a great deal himself and make all his fellow designers and people at the plant, everyone, get down to work. And we were able to create and perfect ships and fly them in unbelievably short periods. This is where spaceships were created by the mind of designers and the wonderful hands of workers. Assemblyman hero of socialist labor Vladimir Morozov. We workers had very little time to carry out the scientists' ideas, but we tried to make it even shorter, because this shop was visited every day by a man whose attitude to the work was a great example to us. His name is now well known to all, Sergei Korolev. My comrades and I are very proud of the fact that the ships and stations that float around in space today and that glorify our country were created by our hands. I assembled Gagarin ship with these hands. One after another, the spaceships were launched in the name of science. They supplied scientists with a great deal of invaluable information. However, only man was capable of deciphering the secrets of the universe. Colonel General Kamanin. By the beginning of the 60s, the Soviet Union had already carried out several cosmic flights. Sputniks went up, and animals, mainly dogs and small organisms. In other words, we gathered experience concerning living things in space. The technology was ready too, rockets and spaceships. But we still had to decide from which professions we would choose cosmonauts. They had to be trained quickly and reliably. We decided that we would use fighter pilots because the nature of their work was very close to the conditions of solo space flights. Fighter pilots maintain radio contact over long distances and fly independently. They are accustomed to overloads, vibration, weightlessness, and noise. They are also trained to take quick decisions in unexpected conditions. All these conditions are close to space flights. But it all began here in this small two-story house where the cosmonauts training center was located. Together with the training installations, headquarters, and other departments. The cosmonauts became acquainted with this training center in March 1960. 20 cosmonauts arrived, the Gagarin group, as we call them now. Soon after, they were all received by the Air Force Commander-in-Chief, Air Marshal Vershinin. After this, the hard training began for man's first flight into space. The spaceship was completed in the beginning of 1961. The trainees started working inside a real spaceship. And so by the beginning of 1961, we had accumulated a great deal of important scientific data showing that there had been no significant changes in the organisms of the living beings that had gone through space flights. This in itself opened up the question of man's flight. But it could not be said that we already knew everything there was to know concerning space flights by such a complex organism as man. After all, every space flight is still a step into the unknown. And neither now, nor most likely in the future, will man be in possession of all the data about the new steps he takes. The morning of April 12th, 1961. For the country and the whole world, this was still an ordinary morning. Kedar, I am Zarya 1. How do you read me? I will convey the commands. Zarya 1, I am Kedar, I read you. All right, Kedar, ignition. I read you, starting ignition. I wish you a good flight. Here we go. The first Earthman saw our planet looking blue and beautiful. And for the first time, the thought occurred to him that it was very small. Yuri Gagarin circled the Earth in 108 minutes. Only 108 minutes. Soviet composer Alexander Pakhmutova dedicated a song to the world's first cosmonaut.
Знаете, каким он парнем был, тот, кто тропку звездную открыл. Пламень был и гром, замер космодром, и сказал негромко он сказал, поехали, Он взмахнул рукой, словно вдоль по питерской пронесся над землей. Словно вдоль по питерской пронесся над землей. Знаете, каким он парнем был, как поля родные он любил. В той степной дали первый старт земли был признанием ей в любви. Он сказал: поехали, он взмахнул рукой, словно вдоль по питерской пронесся над землей. Словно вдоль по питерской пронесся над землей. Знаете, каким он парнем был, на руках весь мир его носил. Сын земли и звезд нежен был и прост, людям свет как дан понес. Он сказал: поехали, он взмахнул рукой, словно вдоль по питерской пронесся над землей. Словно вдоль по питерской пронесся над землей. Знаете, каким он парнем был? Нет, не был.
Now he belonged to the whole world. And this is the way it was every day for many months. And it took a Gagarin to wear the burden of glory so lightly and calmly, to always be full of energy, good-natured and well-meaning. To always be ready with a charming Gagarin smile that the whole world knows. Spaceman German Titov. After his flight, Yuri became our commander of the cosmonaut group. Besides, he was our comrade, friend, and invariably displayed a youthful enthusiasm for all our domestic plans and ideas. But these two sides of his character went very well together. If necessary, he could be strict and demanding. True, we tried not to provoke his severity. Yuri always took part in preparing future cosmonauts for flight. He would share his experience and quietly settle all the problems that might arise during training. He would study in detail all the technical changes in any ship being prepared for a flight. His advice and even his jokes were always important for those who already had been in space or were preparing to go up. Granit, I am Vesna. You fulfilled the first experiment correctly. Proceed to the second. 5 years ago, I had the honor of being the first to go up into space. During these 5 years, my friends, colleagues, and comrades from the cosmonaut group have carried out unforgettable space missions. We have not forgotten the more than 24-hour-long flight by German Titov. German Titov was followed by the spaceships Vostok 3 and Vostok 4, in which Andrian Nikolaev and Pavel Popovich carried out the first group flight. The Vostok 5 spaceship remained in space with Valery Bykovsky aboard for 5 days. He was followed up in space by our wonderful woman cosmonaut, our Chaika Valentina Nikolaeva Tereshkova. The Vostok series was followed by the new multi-seater Voskhod. It was in this ship that the commander, engineer Vladimir Komarov, scientist Konstantin Feoktistov, and Dr. Boris Yegorov completed their famous flight. The spaceship Voskhod helped to resolve an important and difficult experiment, man's first walk in space. This mission was carried out by our Soviet cosmonauts, our friends Pavel Belyaev and Alexei Leonov. Alexei was the first man to walk out into outer space and carry out experiments there. We are now preparing a new, difficult and important experiment. Yuri Gagarin could not divulge at that time what this experiment was, but it really was very important. The spaceship Soyuz was being readied for flight. This new ship was being tested by Vladimir Komarov. Here he is just before leaving for the launching pad. Vladimir Komarov fulfilled the program of the flight, but was killed when returning to Earth. Courage and willpower were displayed by Georgy Beregovoy in testing the new Soyuz. Space technology was being improved and modernized. The cosmonauts had to continually perfect their knowledge. Soon after their first flights, the cosmonaut group enrolled at the Zhukovsky Air Force Academy. Here is the story of how Yuri Gagarin studied. Protocol number 1 of the Government Examining Commission on the diploma work of Colonel Yuri Gagarin, a cadet of the Engineering Department. Yuri Gagarin received top marks on all counts. On the basis of the results of his studies and diploma work, Colonel Yuri Gagarin is conferred the qualifications of engineer, pilot, cosmonaut, and a corresponding diploma. The Commission also passed a special decision. The Commission notes the exceptionally high level of the diploma work and Gagarin's gifts in scientific work, and therefore recommends that he continue studies in the postgraduate correspondence department of the Zhukovsky Academy. Gagarin's ability in scientific research was also noted by Sergei Korolev. He has inborn courage. An analytical mind is an exceptionally industrious, wrote Sergei Korolev about Gagarin. If he gets a good education, then we shall hear his name among the names of top Soviet scientists. Regrettably, this did not happen. We lost him too early. Film director Nikolai Makarov. I remember the 1960s very well. We made a lot of films about space. We were helped by Sergei Korolev and Yuri Gagarin. They both took the cinema very seriously. Besides everything else, they consider the cinema a great help in research work, particularly in the coming broad program of space research. Yuri Gagarin came to our studios many times, and Sergei Korolev often sat here in this hall. Despite the tremendous amount of work that they shouldered, they still found time to see our films and to consult us. But they had little time to be photographed themselves. And today we can but regret that we filmed them so rarely, that we were not more insistent when we were told that there was still time, that we should film others in the meantime. In March 1968, we made arrangements with Yuri Gagarin to film him at home. When we arrived, the whole family was busy reading and answering their mail. Yuri received a tremendous amount of mail. Everyone seemed to want to write to him, and those who could not write sent drawings. And every letter required an answer. That was the voluntary duty of Yuri's wife, Valentina. To all his other concerns, yet more was added. In response to his persistent requests, the government commission agreed to include him in the group of cosmonauts training on the new Soyuz spaceship. The training program included flights on a plane. But this telephone call was not staged by us. Yuri was informed that his next scheduled training flight was on March 27th. March 27th. Who could have known that these would be the last shots ever taken of Yuri Gagarin? Let's look at them again. The head of the cosmonaut training program, Vladimir Shatalov. My comrades and I are often asked the question that sounds like a rebuke. Why did we allow Gagarin to fly? Why didn't we take care of him? What can I say to that? Gagarin was not a museum display and never wanted to be one. By his very nature, he could not have tolerated it. Gagarin was a human being. He was a pilot. He was training for new space flights, and he trained diligently on land and in the air. And today his comrades, those who continue what Gagarin started, all fly, and a good deal too. They fly day and night. They fly the most modern machines. They fly not only because a pilot's heart impels him to fly, but because this is necessary for their future work. As for the rest, I suppose all cosmonauts are just ordinary people. They like nature, dream of spending a few hours with their families near a lake or river. Possibly just a bit more than others, they love the sky. The head of the Cosmonaut Training Center, Georgy Berigovoy. Yuri Gagarin, his memory continues living in our deeds, in the life and work of Star Town. Many of the buildings here still hold the warmth of Yuri's hands. He commissioned the first secondary school in Tar Town. He laid the cornerstone of our club. Star Town has grown and become more beautiful since those days. As a matter of fact, it is a city now. The Yuri Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center has been equipped with new installations. It has become an international center. Not only Soviet cosmonauts train here, but also citizens of other countries. How quickly time passes. It seems only yesterday that Yuri completed his wonderful flight. But Star Town has already trained cosmonauts from many other countries.
Звезды опять нам назначат свидание. Мы слышим разряды космических вьюг. Ты с нами идешь на задание. Первый, верный, испытанный друг.
The head of space flights, Alexei Yeliseyev. Soviet scientists have for long been cooperating successfully with scientists in the socialist countries, with France and India. We are happy to accept proposals on cooperation with other countries. And of course, our program of space research is developing intensively. Nevertheless, we believe that the conquest of space is just beginning. And today we are grateful to and respect those who were the first to blaze the trail into space. They were the first. We built through space continues.